Hello everyone and welcome to Ministry of Cinema's web series, Film Genres in Hollywood. I'm Brother Weatherholt and I'll be your host on this journey into genre filmmaking. In this episode, we dig into the quips and gags of a long line of pranksters in Hollywood's most mischievous genre, the comedy.
The comedy is Hollywood's oldest, most versatile genre, involving the mishaps, misfires, and missteps of life. The genre's adaptability is endless, open to multiple narratives and styles, usually ending positively, although satire and parody may highlight humor's darker aspects. Tailored for silent productions, comedies which relied on humorous visuals were prolific in cinema's early days, beginning with short one-reel scenarios. In fact, the renowned film inventors, Auguste and Louis Lumière, included a comedy in their first public screening in 1895. In the early 20th century, the film innovator Max Sennett, the king of comedy, founded the Keystone Studios, the comic powerhouse of early Hollywood. Through the works of Keystone, Sennett developed the signature comedic style of frantic slapstick. Keystone's first success came from the silent film star Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. Arbuckle and Sennett struck gold with a string of films spanning a decade until Arbuckle's fall from grace with a much-publicized rape and murder scandal involving 3 trials. However, Sennett had diversified Keystone's acting crew, and Arbuckle's fall did not spell the doom for the studio, but instead opened the door for the rise of a new star, Charlie Chaplin. Mentored by Arbuckle, Chaplin quickly rose through the ranks of Sennett's comedy troupe. His debut film, Making a Living, released in 1914 and showcased Chaplin's brilliant horseplay. A year later, Chaplin, in a burst of creativity, produced 15 films for the S&A Film Company, including The Tramp, which showcased the character that would propel Chaplin to the peak of not only the comedy genre, but all of global cinema. Chaplin is best remembered for both his comic genius and his business and artistic influence on early studio Hollywood. In 1919, Chaplin teamed up with D.W. Griffith, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks to form the United Artists Studio in order to have financial and artistic control of their projects. Through the United Artists, Chaplin produced some of his greatest work, including The Gold Rush. The film is a perfect introduction to Chaplin's tramp persona, exemplifying all the charm and slapstick the character had to offer. Years after Gold Rush, Chaplin released City Lights, a romantic comedy which showed a softer, sentimental side to the tramp. In the film, Chaplin falls for Virginia Cheryl's character, a beautiful, blind woman who works as a flower girl. After City Lights, Chaplin made a political statement in Modern Times, a film involving the tramp's struggle with industrial capitalist society. Through humor, Chaplin satirized the dehumanizing labor of assembly line production. Likewise, Chaplin released his own talking films, including The Great Dictator, the actor's poignant jab at Hitler and fascism. Dictator was Chaplin's most commercially successful picture, released right before America's involvement in World War II.
Another important actor of early Hollywood was Buster Keaton. Originally a vaudevillian actor, Keaton is best remembered for his signature expressionless face and acrobatic stunts. His deadpan style led to his nickname, the Great Stone Face. Though responsible for many great films, Keaton is best remembered for his masterpiece, The General.
Like Chaplin, Keaton also began his career under the wing of Fatty Arbuckle, being inducted into cinema with his mentor in Keystone's The Butcher Boy. Another famous actor in comedy's early beginnings was Harold Lloyd. Although Lloyd's films are not as easily remembered now as Chaplin's City Lights or Keaton's The General, his work includes some of the most seminal pictures in the silent era, including the famous clock gag in 1923 film Safety Last. With the advent of sound, comedy was forced to evolve. Bridging the gap between silent and sound film, the duo Laurel and Hardy were both silent slapstick stars and witty conversationalists, splitting their career between sound and silent pictures. The definitive comedy team of early sound comedies was the Marx Brothers. Each of the 5 brothers had various roles, but the team was primarily led by 3 of the 5, the mustachioed wisecrack Groucho, Italian-accented pianist Chico, and girl-chasing pantomime Harpo. The team's success spanned a career of numerous pictures. Most notable of these was Duck Soup and A Night at the Opera. Around the time of the Marx Brothers, a new subgenre of comedy called the screwball comedy began to emerge. Noted for zany plots, rapid-fire dialogue, and sarcasm, the screwball subgenre began with films like It Happened One Night. The film helped develop many of the tropes of the subgenre, influencing Howard Hawks in his screwball masterpiece, His Girl Friday. His Girl is often described as the definitive screwball picture. All the popular elements of the genre are embodied in the picture's fresh narrative and excellent performances by Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell. Another screwball comedy worth mentioning is 1941's The Lady Eve, starring Henry Fonda as a feckless victim to the femme fatale Barbara Stanwyck. Beginning in the 1940s, Abbott and Costello rose up to become the dominant comedy duo of their time. Similar to Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello starred in a number of quirky pictures, including Abbott and Costello Go to Mars and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy.
Beginning in the mid-50s, accomplished studio director Billy Wilder released a string of successful comedies ranging from dramatic emotional pieces to downright spoofs.
The 7-Year Itch, Wilder's now less acclaimed picture, starred Marilyn Monroe at the height of her beauty, featuring one of cinema's most popular images. Monroe and Wilder teamed up years later in the raunchy gangster spoof Some Like It Hot. The film is often remembered as one of comedy's best, featuring brilliant performances by Monroe, Tony Curtis, and Jack Lemmon. The film's silly plot, involving two out-of-work musicians forced to cross-dress to join a traveling all-female band, was so successfully executed, the trope of cross-dressing is now an often explored plot element in comedies. A year after Some Like It Hot, Wilder and Lemmon took a different direction, teaming up for the much darker The Apartment. By the time Wilder's comedies were released, the cultural landscape of Hollywood had changed. On television, situational comedies, or sitcoms, satisfied most of the public's need for comedic content. Hollywood had to adapt in changing demands. In order for Hollywood comedies to flourish, each film release had to offer something uniquely cinematic. An excellent example of this comes with Nichols's The Graduate, a racy narrative about a young teenager who is seduced by the attractive Miss Robinson. The film embodies the spirit of its time and could only have been produced for the big screen. Around the time of The Graduate's release, one of cinema's greatest parodists, Mel Brooks, made his directorial debut with The Producers, a clever pick about pseudo-producers deliberately attempting to produce a box office flop to con the studios. Brooks furthered his absurdist style with Western parody Blazing Saddles, horror lampoon Young Frankenstein, and sci-fi farce Spaceballs. Around the same time, New York stand-up comic turned auteur Woody Allen released his classic idiosyncratic pictures, including Best Picture winner Annie Hall. Annie Hall, innovative in numerous ways, is a refreshing spin on romantic comedies, tearing down many cinematic conventions, even breaking the sacred fourth wall to show the paranoid ramblings and musings of the angst-ridden protagonist. Another Allen classic, Manhattan, showcased the director's unique take on New York City, but this time in black and white. Much in contrast to Woody Allen, comedy team composed of the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrahams struck a different kind of success with zany, pun-ridden slapstick parodies. Perhaps most quoted at these films is Airplane, a film which employs every gag in the book and includes Leslie Nielsen in one of the most memorable roles. Nielsen would join the same team in many additional films, including the spoof of cop crime flicks, The Naked Gun, and its sequels. At the times of filmmakers like Brooks and Zucker, television was making perhaps the single greatest contribution to the film genre with late-night sketch comedy show Saturday Night Live. SNL provided the world with a renaissance of young comedian actors and new comedic styles. Standing as the crew's earliest star, John Belushi embodied the frenetic East Coast spirit of SNL. Together with director John Landis, Belushi would shine in comedy classics National Lampoon's Animal House and The Blues Brothers. Belushi's tragic death from an overdose of speedballs, a cocktail of cocaine and heroin, marked a shocking end to a rising star. Sadly, history repeated itself with a similar death by Chris Farley, another SNL upstart famous for his bombastic, goofball character in films such as Tommy Boy. However, the lives of SNL alumni are not always tragic. Steve Martin, a frequent guest star of Saturday Night Live, performed in many notable comedies, including Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, with co-star John Candy, as well as his comic tour de force, The Jerk. Likewise, Martin's SNL co-star, Bill Murray, has had an incredibly successful career. Alongside Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, Murray starred in cultural landmark Ghostbusters, an Academy Award-nominated adventure comedy following a gang of paranormal exterminators. Murray and Ramis also struck gold years later with Groundhog Day, an introspective and existential piece. Ramis also directed Murray alongside Chevy Chase in Caddyshack, a comedy that equal parts involves golf and gopher. In the same year, another SNL star, Eddie Murphy, teamed up with Dan Aykroyd in Trading Places, a successful Landis picture that puts a twist on the nature versus nurture debate. A year later, Murphy struck gold with blockbuster comedy Beverly Hills Cop. Together with Ghostbusters, which was released in the same year, Beverly Hills Cop defined the comedic style of the decade. 2 decades later, Murphy would star in another defining comedy, Shrek, as a donkey sidekick to an ogre voiced by Mike Myers. Myers, yet another SNL performer, had also had a successful comedic career by the time of Shrek, playing the slacker rocker Wayne in Wayne's World, a spin-off from an SNL skit. Also, Myers had written and starred as both hero and villain in his Austin Powers films, which spoofed James Bond and spy films. And finally, Adam Sandler, another SNL graduate, starred in his own string of films under Happy Madison Productions. It's true that films centered around SNL cast have dominated the comedy genre after the television show's debut. However, the work of a few other notable directors and actors stands out at this time. Perhaps the most successful non-SNL director of his time, Rob Reiner had critical and commercial success with various comedies. Reiner made his directorial debut with This Is Spinal Tap, a highly quotable mockumentary about the pitfalls of a washed-up hairband's comeback. Reiner then directed a fairy tale rom-com spoof, The Princess Bride, based on William Goldman's fantasy novel of the same name. Right after Princess Bride, Reiner directed the romantic comedy subgenre's seminal pictures, When Harry Met Sally. Another notable director of his time, John Hughes specialized in coming-of-age teen comedies. Beginning with 16 Candles, Hughes again teamed up with a group of young actors called the Brat Pack in The Breakfast Club, perhaps Hollywood's pivotal and most remembered coming-of-age high school comedy. After Breakfast Club, Hughes released another iconic high school film, the often-quoted Ferris Bueller's Day Off. A survey of the 90s and turn-of-the-millennium comedies would be incomplete without mentioning the work of comedian Will Ferrell. Beginning his career in SNL, Ferrell had minor roles in a few films till he hit it big with his party boy performance as Frank the Tank in frat comedy Old School. The cast of Old School belonged to a loosely tied comedic group, sometimes referred to as the Frat Pack, which were featured in several comedies at the time. The Frat Pack teamed up in Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, which starred Will Ferrell as his now iconic newsman that catapulted his career to the peak of Hollywood comedies. After Anchorman, Ferrell had an almost unstoppable run at the box office, with successes such as Talladega Nights, Step Brothers, and Blades of Glory. One of the leading filmmakers to make this style of comedy possible was producer Judd Apatow. Apatow produced several influential films of the time, including the highest-grossing high school comedy of all time, Superbad. But he also directed a few notable ones as well, beginning with The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Apatow also directed Knocked Up, starring Seth Rogen in a stoner character that would later define his career. Seth Rogen's stoner character was celebrated further in Pineapple Express, the weed-centric narrative where Rogen and co-star James Franco channeled the Cheech and Chong energy in a comedy adventure. Rogen and Franco would eventually become their own comedic team, building their own style of comedy in movies like This Is the End. One final director to mention, Wes Anderson, is like Woody Allen in that his artistic, highly stylized comedies transcend just laughs and gaffes, truly standing as works of art. Anderson's elaborate set designs and costumes, atypical plots, and unique dialogue highlight the films of his career. Anderson masterfully directed large casts in films such as The Royal Tenenbaums, Moonrise Kingdom, and The Grand Budapest Hotel. Before wrapping up comedies, it's worth a moment to take a look at Borat, or Cultural Learnings of America for Make Benefit Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan. The film stars Sacha Baron Cohen as Kazakh TV host who is sent to America to learn the culture and spread Kazakh greatness. The film blends live-action shots where Cohen's character plays Borat in real-life situations, strung together by a loosely filmed narrative. The film, innovative for its structure, is a comical landmark for making blatant political statements about American uniculturalism and ignorance of international people.
From Charlie Chaplin through screwball comedies, all the way to Borat, comedies make us rethink what is culturally acceptable. This aspect of comedies remains unchanged, and we expect for this tradition to continue in Hollywood's next century.